So when did you start realizing that you were an outstanding football player?
Well, in high school, my senior year in high school, things kind of fell in place. Because actually the original high school I went to was in Metairie, a suburb of New Orleans, but we had to move to New Orleans because my grandmother got sick. On my mom's side, we had to care for her, so the high school ended up being in their district was Brother Martin, so I only went there 1 year. But when I went there, the coaches promoted me better, and I ended up making like all city, all district, and all Louisiana, and ended up getting signed with Mississippi State. Brother Martin High School was where I graduated. They just seemed to turn out a lot of players every year. They had parade All-Americans and guys end up at Michigan, Notre Dame. Some schools just seem to know how to develop talent and have a rapport with colleges. So going to Brother Martin was the best thing I ever did moving. And then, we ended up, I made all those district teams in the league and city and state, and then I did my visits and I went to Mississippi State on a football scholarship.
What are some of your greatest accomplishments there?
In football?
In college football.
Oh, college? Well, let's see, man. I've always had crazy, stuff happen along the way to get to success. Because at State, I signed with Mississippi State mostly for the coach who was there. Coach Tom Good was my offensive line coach. He played for the Colts and he had a Super Bowl ring. He was offensive lineman, so he was like a dad, father figure, hero. And after the first year, they fired him because we had a terrible season. So he left, but the first year I tore my MCL and was in a cast. And then the second spring that I was eligible for after being redshirted, I blew my knee out. So I was on crutches like a year, the first year and a half, 2 years there. So I ended up leaving because the coach I loved and the whole staff got fired, and ended up transferring to a 1AA school called Northeast Louisiana University in Monroe, which is, they had won a national championship and one conference championship. So that was where I did really well. I made all conference, all Southland Conference, and all academic, all Louisiana, and I had a lot of success there,
And you ended up having some experience with the Washington Redskins. How did
Yes.
that come about?
When I came out eligible for the draft, when I got done with college, I was working out for all the teams that would come through, and I didn't get drafted, so they signed me a free agent, and that was the year that they had won the Super Bowl. But the team was really loaded, and going up there, I really, you kind of think you're pretty tough and all, and it was like a huge reality check going up to the Redskins with the Hogs.
Yeah.
I always say, I really wasn't mentally or physically ready like I thought I was. It was like shell shock because I got cut and I didn't perform well. It was the worst I'd ever performed, and it was like a big disappointment, but I think it had to happen for me to advance, because after that, I went to the Saints, the Falcons, and then pursued football for like 8 or 9 more years trying to get to the NFL. So, those failures happen and you grow, right? Through them, injuries and whatnot. Stuff that you can't see when it happens. It ends up, being something that's good.
Was Goldberg in the Falcons at the time?
Yeah, 94, he was, yeah.
Did you know him at all?
Yes, yeah. We used to go, he was a D lineman and I was offense, so we used to headbutt, going against each other in drills.
Yeah.
And he was a tough guy, really good football player. He bounced around several NFL teams. He had a lot of injury, I know shoulder and injury problems that slowed him down, but he was tough, as tough as they come, and a really good guy.
What do you think of him coming back to wrestling now?
I think it's great, man. He's always been a super nice, down-to-earth guy, and I think he's good for wrestling, his character, and he's always represented himself in wrestling well. I've never seen or heard of anything negative from him, and I love him as a personal friend and a guy. It's good to see him do so well.
Do you think he's going to stick around for a while after WrestleMania?
Well, they say he wants to wrestle with has a young son, and if that's a big deal, I think he will, and he looks in tremendous shape, and he obviously doesn't have too many injury problems, so yeah, I could see him staying for a few more years,
And you also ended up in the CFL. We're from Canada, of course, so I guess that was at the time when they had American TV.
Yeah, which, I tell people I was in the CFL, and I tell them I played in America. They're like, wait, how'd that happen? Well, like you say, 94, 95, they expanded to the States. And Atlanta released me in 94, and the Shreveport Pirates team picked me up instantly. So I went there and signed a 2-year deal. Started, I forget, I think they played 18 games maybe. I ended up starting 10 games one year and 18 the next. And I got a lot of experience, and I had a tremendous honor there. Our head coach was Forrest Gregg, who's in the NFL Hall of Fame. He played for Vince Lombardi, and he's an offensive lineman, so that was a tremendous experience. I was there 2 years, and then '95 I left there and went, actually moved to arena football in '96, which I always said the beating money ratio is not good because you get really beat up. It's indoor turf and you play both ways. But, I moved on. I don't know if you have questions in that, but I moved on to NFL Europe arena and then tried back with the NFL, and then ended up going into wrestling.
Who did you play for in NFL Europe?
Frankfurt Galaxy. Okay. Yeah.
What's the popularity of football like?
The only teams, the teams that draw are Germany, and I think it's just 'cause they go out there and they have the beer garden, they drink so much, they just get fired up. I don't think they understand it, but they're doing soccer chants. There's like 50,000. Frankfurt, I think the teams ended up in Frankfurt, Rhein, and Dusseldorf. The other countries, football to them is soccer. It's not, and a lot of them don't even understand American football because soccer's been around for forever, and they take that stuff serious, man. Those people end up wanting to have riots and fights. The towns are really, they don't like each other.
Speaking of fights, I read that you were in a couple of fights when you were in the CFL. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I was always real passionate. It was bad because it wasn't good to lose your control, get penalties and whatnot. But yeah, coming out of martial arts, was raised to have a fighting spirit, and you should always control that, play within the rules, and don't try to be dirty, which I never was. But actually in New Orleans, when I went to the Saints after being cut from the Redskins, I swore that when I went there, I would not go out there with my tail between my legs. I would go out there and leave my mark, whether I made a team or not. And I started the first fight in camp, just to let people know. And I got in a fight with Ronaldo Turnbull, who made the Pro Bowl that year, and all the local media was wanting to see me make the practice squad, So I started fighting there actually. And even in college, but in the CFL, I got kicked out a couple of games actually, and it cost me fines and stuff. But the fans loved it, because they'd be on the jumbotron and they'd be chanting Heidenreich, So it was good and bad,
What were the groupies like for you in football? Is there some pretty crazy stories out there?
Well, yeah. I guess every group of groupies has the names, I think that maybe cleat chases might have been used, but I always had girlfriends, man. I was never into that deal. Yeah, they always have girls that like a rock and roll star or a wrestler or an actor or a football player, just depending on wherever they fall into that category. And there's always guys that are willing to give them attention,
Yeah.
So